You're listening to
The Classroom Collaborative
podcast with your hosts, Dee Wills,
Ed Rock,
and Adam Peterson.
Here we go.
We're so glad you're here.
Let's get started. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Classroom Collaborative podcast. I am Adam Peterson.
Hi, I'm Dee Wills.
And we are back for season 2 of the podcast. We kind of just unofficially called it that because we took the longest break in podcast history, probably.
Yes. And, I mean, we did actually record one, but remember how my internet was so horrible that it sounded like robots, so we just couldn't even publish it? It
was tough, yeah. But and honestly, it was one of those things that I've been gone, too. Like, right after you traveled, we went on a vacation. We've been out of town for baseball. You've been insanely busy with the Educator Summit. How did that go? How did it turn out for the
it was really good. We had, just a ton of teachers, but the comments, the feedback has been just spectacular. I know you could go in and see how people have responded. But what I love was, I've received additional emails on top of what's posted in the summit of people who said, like, I've always wanted to go to the Vegas conference, but I couldn't go because I have 3 children. I live on the East Coast. I just can't, I just could never do that. And so this was a way to see all of those people, and not have to get a babysitter and all the things. So, that's really, the plus side of having to do something virtually. So I'm really happy that people were able to get such value from their own home.
Right. It was
although
pretty
we're
amazing.
ready to hit the road again. I'm ready.
I know. I'm ready too. But it was cool to see comments come through on social media about my session that I did and just see other presenters posting that too. Like just the feedback and more so, not even the feedback on what I presented, but the feedback of just people saying thank you. When you feel like you've really offered teachers something, like you said, that was just easy to access. And it was a lot of stuff too. I mean, when you mentioned the Vegas,
it's still there. So they have until the 27th.
That's what I was going to say. Can people, so today is July 6th, 2021. Can people still, like if they're listening to this and going, oh my gosh, I missed out. Can they sign up now and watch sessions?
Yeah, they have until the 27th to watch all of the speakers. The keynotes will be there for 30 days. So towards the end of July, I need to take those down because contractually that's what we agreed to.
So September 27th is when it's the end date.
Right.
How, like if a teacher's listening to our podcast and it's August of 2021, can they sign up then? They can sign up until September 27th, basically.
All the way up until the 27th. I mean, if they're ready to do 30 hours of watching.
One day. That's not possible.
actually physically, yeah. But if they can get it done in 2 days, there's something for everyone. I don't know if, one person is going to watch every session. Just like when I go to a conference, I go with a certain set of things that I'm really looking to learn more about. And we just had such a variety. So, and we had people presenting on the same subject.
Yes.
So that was nice to have, different perspectives on how to run something within your classroom. So,
well, I was working with a school the Friday before the conference launched, and I was working with like 20 teachers, and a good portion of them had already signed up. And one of the things they mentioned when other teachers in the room were questioning it, they're like, oh my gosh, I haven't heard of this. And they're like, first of all, you get 30 hours. Like you get a ton of credit for watching this, and we can do it. So it was cool to hear teachers that I hadn't really presented about the conference to, that already knew about the conference before I ever talked to them. And we're talking back and forth about, I signed up for this reason and you should sign up for this reason. And it was cool to hear an outside perspective about it because I knew all about it from you, and we had talked about your interviews quite a bit, you and I off the podcast, but hearing other teachers talk about the excitement for it was really cool. I know I called you from that classroom because teachers were like, we have questions. I'm like, well, let's get Dee on the phone because I can't answer them.
I know, I pulled over off the side of the road to answer that question. I know, that was so fun. It was so fun. I think you're probably the first person I know who's done face-to-face,
Yeah. Oh
I know there's other people, but just these are not people that I talk to daily, I guess. But how fun.
It was so good to get back in front of teachers. And it was nice because I was only a couple hours from home. These were teachers who have come to Schaumburg to see us speak before at the Illinois City Conference, and that's the principal that knew me from there. And it was a small group, but honestly, like I've started thinking about this as we've gone through this pandemic of, yes, I'm going to miss Vegas, no doubt. I'm going to miss that 6,000 plus teacher atmosphere, of course, because there's something, there's a high that you get from that as a presenter and a teacher. But these long lasting relationships with schools are making me realize that this is really what I was meant to do when I left the classroom. Like, yeah, conferences will come and go. I love it, but getting to go work with this 15 to 20 teachers. And now I feel like I somewhat quote unquote know them, like we built a relationship, and the principal already talks about having me back to work on ongoing stuff. Like that's what I love about my job right now, is getting to build those ongoing relationships and to do it face to face again.
And be able to be that person that can do that question answer. You can't do question answers within a room of 350 or whatever your room happens to hold.
Mm-hmm.
You just can't, in a way that everybody, is going to be able to or want to maybe listen to some of those questions. But when you have a smaller group, it's a great way to, do that check for understanding, so to speak, make sure that they are really clear on whatever answer it is, those unasked questions. But you can just go ahead and, dive into those and make sure you have clarity. I love
totally.
That.
And a lot of what we talked about was just stuff to get them ready to go for the new school year. Hoping they've already talked about, there are less restrictions in place, and hopefully that continues to grow as we see, vaccinations spread. And not to get on a political subject here, but, I feel like things are starting to.
Who knew that would be a political subject, right? I mean,
right?
Who knew?
Just things are starting to open. I don't care what side you're on. I really don't about vaccinations. I'm just happy to see things starting opening back up. Like we took my grandma to the zoo the other day. My 83-year-old grandma spent a couple days with us this weekend and stayed with us for a little vacation, and took her to the zoo and to see just people out enjoying life again, out and about, and knowing that we can do that safely now, so
hopefully we never take that for granted again, right? I mean, we took that for granted, and then when it was gone, we were all like, how are we going to get through, how are we going to get through this distance from other people?
Right.
And some of us, perhaps maybe me, love solitude, right? But, it is something though, when it's back again, it's really nice. But that's not what we're going to talk about today.
No, and that's kind of where I was going, was hearing these teachers so excited to start a new school year. And I was working with pre-KK and 1 teachers, and just hearing their excitement about setting up their classrooms for, the right way again, and getting everything put out and hoping that they can use it. And that leads to our conversation today a little bit about the excitement of starting a brand new school year, but yet that excitement can be maybe not the same for everyone, right? Like there are some parents that are questioning this excitement. There are some teachers that are wondering about the students coming to their classroom. And these articles that you found are something that I dealt with as a teacher. I didn't deal with as a parent because my kids never were around this, but around this age, but to deal with as a teacher and then to read these articles you sent, we're going to talk about this term redshirting. And I had heard about that in sports, right? Like I'd always heard a redshirt freshman, and I never really thought about much about that in school. And then you presented these articles to me, and I was kind of blown away by the statistics.
Yeah, it's huge. So for those of you who aren't sure what that means, it's that for parents who are on the cusp of when to send their children to kindergarten, if they are a really young, just kind of within a month of that cutoff date, then there's a hesitation or a question: should they send them, or should they keep them in preschool for another year or daycare or whatever, and then send them the next year? And so this was something that, back in the day when the perfect son, he was a September birthday, and in California, the cutoff date was, I think, October 1st.
Okay.
And so we sent him to kindergarten, and he was 4 and didn't turn 5 until, a couple weeks in.
So that's what I was going to ask you personally. Yeah. Pretending you and I have never read these articles before.
Right.
Personally, how did you, as a parent, how did you feel? Did you even think about this? I never
really thought about it. We went through the kindergarten screening. Academically, he was ready. He had a higher than average vocabulary. And so he was developmentally, perhaps at that time, older than a 4-year-old, because he was surrounded by adults. We all had these conversations, and, so he was academically ready.
Yeah.
Socially, I would say he was ready as well. I mean, he got along with other kids, a little on the shy side. And so we said, okay, the kindergarten screening went well. Okay, let's go. And, we did pretty well. I mean, Matt had a successful, education
prior to
throughout.
Okay.
However, there were other things later on that we really noticed and started going, oh, we never thought of that. Oh, we never thought of that. And so these articles are things that people who have the luxury of holding their child back an additional year, because at the time we were thinking, ooh, less preschool. Payment,
right, like you get them into it. Yeah. Well, that's why I asked you personally how you felt, because I want teachers to think about that too. Teachers, whether you're a parent or not, put yourself in those shoes and think about where your stance was before we get to the statistics in these articles. And I'm not saying this is the end all be all. These articles are great. There's been a lot of study done about this, which I didn't even know was out there until Dee Dee shared these with me. But I want you listeners to think about yourself in this position. Where did you, maybe you didn't have a stance on it, but where did you feel you kind of flowed? Did you flow towards, yes, send them to school because they're, if they're age ready, send them, right? If they're close, just send them. They're not going to.
I'd like to kind of finish my story about Matt's experience, because now he's
Sorry.
25, right? So I'll finish that later, because I want to tie into another study that came out. But,
well, and I think personally, I was kind of like you were. I always felt like that as a teacher. I always I kind of wish I had these articles ahead of me before, but I told parents all the time, like, when in doubt, I always said, when in doubt, send them. Like, what's it going to hurt is what I always said. What's it going to hurt them to get more of an experience, right? They're going to experience more. But now that I read some of these, I'm like, man, I can see why some parents didn't. I had some students who were not held back. That's not the right term, but waited.
Delayed in starting. So, what the statistics are showing are that college-educated adults, higher socioeconomic advantaged families tend to opt into the redshirting, and those students who are parents who are lower socioeconomic, one, don't even realize it's a thing,
right?
Which is, that was me. Didn't even know it was a thing, and are thinking about no more daycare. Let's go ahead and get him started. He might be a little immature. She might be a little immature, but at least he's going to be in an academic setting, most likely to catch up, that kind of thing. Right. And hey, you know what? If it doesn't work out, we can always have them repeat kindergarten, right? Mm-hmm. These are conversations I've had numerous times.
Yes.
And we already know that stigma of repeating kindergarten is huge.
It's huge. In a lot of schools I've experienced where I'm at, it's not even something they do anymore. Like, it is highly looked down upon to have a child repeat any grade. It's all, because I think part of it is because there's so much more help in place now, whether it's through interventions or different processes. If you're whatever type of school it is that you run with your behavior interventions or academic interventions or whatever it may be. I know at our school, it was, when I first started, we did all the time. We recommended kids for retention in kindergarten all the time, and now when I left that school, we didn't even bring up the subject. Yeah.
Not so much. A couple of other things, so the pros are, if you have the pros for redshirting, is that your child has another year of development. Mm-hmm. And we know, just think about the difference between a 4-year-old and a 5-year-old. I mean, there's a huge difference in where they are. So they have a little bit more maturity going in. Physically, they're a little bit bigger. And then over time, the studies are showing that those students who are redshirted, is that the right expression?
Redshirted? Yeah. Redshirted? Yeah.
Took on that red shirt. Therefore, they have a higher SAT score, 40 points higher on the SAT. They're more likely, 2.1% more likely to go to college, 3.3% more likely to graduate college, 7.2% more likely to graduate from a prestigious college, 15.4% less likely to be incarcerated for juvenile crime. So, I mean, those are the pros. Now, having said that, we have to remember that I already said that those people who generally take place in redshirting are higher socioeconomic. So those
Yep.
could be related as well.
Well, and that's the thing that they point out in this article that I thought was it's one of those things that you read it, and I'm sure you felt, I think you, well, I don't know, maybe it's just me. You're so much more brighter and well-rounded than I am. Maybe you didn't. I
was not redshirted, just so you know.
I read this and I was like, yeah, it totally makes sense. And it talks about the resources in schools. So when you talk about the socioeconomic, a lot of times when it's a tough line to walk, right? Because kids who do start early in a school that has tons of resources and all the money in the world to provide those resources, they're going to get the extra help they need to get them to that level. But if you start a 4-year-old in an area where there aren't outside resources and they're not able to do interventions, there's not extra hands to work one-on-one with a student, they are not going to make the same progress as another 4-year-old. And I mean, I think any grade level, but especially at this young age.
Well, I taught at a title school, so we had the haves and have-nots definitely in our school. And we had some students that were, a full 14 months older than other students.
Right.
Or 15 months older. And when we just think about the exposure to vocabulary, the exposure to reading, even if they were both along the same plane socioeconomically, there still is, extra time in development. So it is really, it makes it's a big burden on schools.
Yes.
Right? It's a big burden on teachers to have not just having to differentiate because of, ability, but they also have, that maturity.
Yep.
It does say that those students who start younger tend to more likely be labeled as learning disabled or immature. Mm-hmm. Because when you compare, your 4-year-old with your 5.5-year-old, right? It's just such a difference in ability and maturity. The other thing that we're talking about, though, is if you have a student who is redshirted, let's say they're redshirted, but they need speech, they need, OT, all of those services, there's a delay in getting those. So there's the con against it.
Right.
Right.
But luckily, again, I'm speaking from where I'm at. I know there's a lot of outside help for that within the districts. I don't know if this is the same everywhere or not, but I know, speaking from experience, our daughter, Olivia, she was trying to think, is she the oldest or she's the younger of her class? So she has a June birthday. So she was, made the cutoff by 2 months because it's September 1st here, 5 by September 1st for kindergarten. But she also qualified for what was called outpatient speech because she had a lot of speech issues that we found through a screening. And again, this is because we had the resources in our district. I don't know if every district has this possibility, but because we lived in the school district that she was going to go to, we were able to present her speech evaluation to the school district, and she qualified for outpatient speech help. So she got to go see one of the school speech therapists as an outpatient student, knowing that she was going to be going to that district. So again, that's a benefit of living.
Parents who know that that's an option.
That's right. And honestly, we wouldn't have known had the speech therapist been one of our good friends. I mean, we didn't even know to get her an evaluation, but we knew because of one of our friends said, "Hey, I hate to tell you this, but I think you need to get her evaluated." We were young parents. We had no clue. We thought all kids just talk when they want to talk, we didn't have any idea that she was behind.
Right. Right.
So it's so true about where you live and the information you have access to, because here we are, we're both teachers, and we didn't even know that was an option until someone presented it to us, Right.
I know that there's a lot of emphasis lately on early childhood education and making it mandatory, kindergarten mandatory, still not mandatory in all states. Full day kindergarten still not a required thing in all states. Colorado just recently went to full day last year or two, I think. So, it is difficult because we know that we hear that early childhood education is so important. So it is a little counterintuitive if you have a parent who says, well, early childhood education is important, so I'm going to send them early. But if they could get in a well-rounded, great preschool, Head Start kind of thing, then that's a benefit. So then we read a couple other articles. There's a great podcast. Most of you probably know Cult of Pedagogy is like, woo, goals, podcast goals. But I was looking at her article and it was talking about, she was having a conversation with, an expert in the field. And she was saying that, students, they were really looking at adolescent boys, right? Their reflections on being redshirted in relationship to like their happiness level, right? Life satisfaction level. And so I thought that was pretty interesting, article. And then I'll kind of bring it back to kind of the Perfect Son a little bit about him. Totally. So he started, school in California where the cutoff date was October 1st. He was a September baby, an early September baby. And then we moved to Missouri where the cutoff was the end of June. So July 1st. So, he was literally in the same class with students peers that were 15 months older than him. Wow. So here we have, Matt, who is, you know how much a kid grows in a year, let alone, a year and a quarter. So he was physically smaller than his peers. He started 5th grade out there. He played football. Bless. He was like 90% helmet. And the other guys had, they were like Matt was not destined for contact sports. And then as we got into middle school, here we have, his friends are all like gorilla, hairy little men. And here's Matt still looking like a little boy. So he had that until about his, around junior year, physically he caught up with, his peers. And so as we think about these things, that kind of weighs a little bit on confidence. I would say Matt is very confident. I mean, he's not maladjusted, but, we know the pressure in high school. We know to fit in. And when physically, I have these pictures of him standing next to his best friend. His friend's like huge and he's like small. He did fine. However, he started college younger. He was 17 when he started college. He was the last one to get his driver's license. All of those things,
it adds up.
It adds up. He's shorter than the girls for a long time. Then all of a sudden he got junior year, he grew up tall. So, but, all of those things kind of add up. And so, I, again, parent guilt, realized about that time, oh my gosh, he's really, these are the things that kind of weigh in on him.
I think it's interesting too to think about. I mean, you dealt with it with Matt as a single child, but it's also interesting when you look at families of multiple children. And we only have 2, but I dealt with a family who I taught, great family. All the kids succeeded in school and are still succeeding in school, but it was their middle child and their youngest. They have 3. The middle child is a boy who is very small for his age, even after waiting to start him. No, I take that back. Yes, even after waiting to start him. So I can only imagine how much different it would be if they started him when he should have, right?
Right.
Their youngest is a girl who is 3 years younger, maybe, and still taller than the middle brother. And she waited, and she was a difference. Like, she was one I kind of wished would have started when she was supposed to. They waited a year, but I noticed at that level. See, I think, and you probably know this from when you taught kindergarten too, and kindergarten teachers listeners know that there's a huge, not just in age maturity difference, but a maturity difference between boys and girls in kindergarten. Yeah. And this little one, we'll call her Kristen, she was so much more mature than not just the girls in the class, but the boy, like way beyond the boys' maturity level, because she waited a year. So that was one of those where it was an interesting situation, because I noticed she wasn't one who, and I still think about this, like, she never really wanted to get down on the floor and play kitchen. She never really wanted to get down on the floor and be creative. Like, she was like, I'd rather go read and I'd rather do some arts and crafts, which is great. I'm fine. But you could totally see how much more mature she was because she waited an extra year than not just the other girls, but way beyond the maturity of the boys in that class. So It's an interesting line when you
It
think
is.
about not just age, but the sex of the child as well.
Right. And the leadership, when you're a
Yeah,
little bit older, you can be more of a leader. And when you're younger, you tend to be a little more of and these are generalizations, but more of a follower. So I was also looking at an article, from the podcast, The Cult of Pedagogy. So if you're not following that podcast,
yeah.
it's like podcast goals. It's amazing. But they had an expert on there who had talked about, um, life satisfaction
Hmm.
on a life satisfaction scale. She had this like inquiry she did with students, adolescent boys who were, redshirted and those who were not, and asked them, basically, how happy were you that your parents redshirted you? And those who were redshirted said they were very happy with their parents' decision. Those who were not redshirted went on and on about the disadvantages, of starting so much younger than
And it
their
was interesting.
otherwise.
It was some of the same stuff you mentioned about Matt. Like they mentioned, obviously the size, the strength of the other boys.
Right.
The older
Right.
boys got the girls. Like
Right.
it's what, and I don't know where I stood. If I think back, I think my parents started me when I was supposed to start, but I don't remember. I have a June birthday. I think I started the
I
year I was
know.
supposed to start. I honestly don't remember, but it's interesting to read this and then hear you talk about Matt, because you can see totally where he fell into which side and how it worked. And
Right.
yeah, they're great articles.
Right. So we'll go ahead and we'll add links to where you can find them. One of them is from Education Week, which I get that, newsletter. So that's one of them, and the other one's the Cult of Pedagogy. So I'll include those two. We had a third article, but it was kind of ambivalent. So it was kind of like, I'm not sure exactly what you're saying, but it is very, it's an interesting topic, and as teachers, we are going to have students who are, significantly different in age, especially if they start in one state and move to another,
Hmm.
where those inconsistencies are there. That's one thing that I think would make our jobs as educators, so much easier, is
Right.
if we all had the same, some universal rules, like when to school, cutoff date would be one of them, and whether or not kindergarten's a mandatory thing. Because it really is, as much as we have a mobile society,
Hmm.
right? We have people who move from state to state, especially, if you're in the military and those kinds of
Oh
things.
yeah.
It would be nice if we could have some consistencies, because being a teacher is hard enough.
Yep.
Like, it's hard. But this is, just another, I just have this mental image of like teachers carrying all this stuff on their backs, right? That they have to overcome and try to make work. And then all of a sudden, let me just put this other brick on top. Oh, guess what? Somebody's going to be a year and a half younger than the other one. So,
Well, and it's funny you mentioned California, because that's one thing that has always blown my mind when I talk to our friend Kurt Schwengel. He teaches California and
yeah,
or teaches kindergarten in California. I remember him telling all the time. He's like, yeah, I have 4-year-olds that come to kindergarten, like get dropped off because the cutoff's not till October. And it
yeah,
blew my mind to think, like, I have some that aren't starting till they're 6. And then to have a 6-year-old and a 4-year-old in the same class trying to teach the same content. So I guess teachers, when you're thinking about this, obviously there's nothing you personally can do. I mean, we can't just say, nope, you can't come to it, right? Like districts have their rules and every states have their rules. So I guess as an educator, I would highly suggest, or we would highly suggest if this is happening in your school and you're needing the extra help, start reaching out and seeing what resources are available, seeing what extra help is available for the kids that need it. You've got enough on your plate as far as differentiation goes, that trying to differentiate with maturity now is even harder.
yeah.
But really these are, like Dee Dee said, she'll link the articles. They're great. And just look at more research that's out there about it. And I guess start bringing it up to the right people. If it's something you feel really strongly about in your district. The other thing is, if you're a teacher listening to this and maybe you're nearing retirement, or you're considering, maybe you're out of the classroom already, I am absolutely loving what I'm doing. And I think it can maybe kind of help with this type of issue. So I'm getting to work with kids who aren't in kindergarten yet. So kind of like a TK, I guess, but not really an official transitional kindergarten. But my program that I'm running with my students, I get to work one-on-one or in small groups with kids who missed that cutoff, and are just trying to get an extra step up before they head into school. And I'm loving it. I'm seeing some growth with students who I get to work with, and the parents have had a lot to say. So I guess just see what's out there in your area too. If there are parents questioning, send them to these articles, get some research in the parents' hands, but also have them, research other options if they're really struggling with not sending or sending their child.
Well, I didn't always know what to say when parents would ask me,
I didn't either.
If you had a sibling, right? You had, brother, and he was born in December, so it wasn't really a question. But then now another child is coming up and they'll ask you. And I was always like, well, I think if they're ready, and that was always sort of so being able to say, this is obviously a personal decision, but there's a lot more to think about than whether they're going to be in school at 5 or not. It's think about when they're 15, when they're 18 and they're going, Matt started college, wasn't even a legal adult yet, so those are just some things.
We have a friend like that.
He was also the last one to be able to go into a bar.
Right? One of our friends.
When you're in college.
It totally is. One of our friends' daughters just got, what do you call it? Signed, like a commitment to a college to play basketball. She just graduated high school.
I say fake ID. No.
No. She just got signed to a college to play basketball, and the mom, Lori, she was posting pictures about, like the college signing day when she got to sign the agreement to go play. And I said, "Oh my gosh, how fun for her!" And she goes, "Yeah, but Adam, it was quite funny because my husband and I had to sign because she's not 18 yet. Like they had to sign her college commitment because she wasn't legally old enough to do it." So I'm so glad that you sent these over. And like I said, I wish I would have had these when I was still in the classroom, because I always said, just send them. And now I'm starting to wonder, how many kids did I set up for failure by doing that? But they had me as a teacher. So
I don't know that you necessarily set them up for failure, but there's just a lot more to think about than what am I doing this year. There's a lot more to think about than what as a parent. And of course as parents, we worry about every single thing that we do, but there's a lot more to consider. So as long as parents are informed, then that helps them.
Well, and I think that's why this research is so good. It's not quite as black and white as you might think it is when you decide yes or no. So great idea. All right, episode 1 of season 2. Woo! We're going to stick with this consistency. We promise. I don't break promises, so I'm going to say promise because we want to keep going. One thing we want to do with this season of the podcast too is bring on more guests that are experts in certain areas of education. And I know you and I have talked quite a bit about, what we do beyond the classroom. So I think it'd be fun for us to bring on some entrepreneurs in education and see what's going on in the educational world and how they can help teachers out. And I don't know. I've got a lot of ideas in mind, as Dee Dee does as well. So thank you.
You're the idea guy. So I love it. Just tag me. Let me tag along.
All right. Well, thank you all for sticking with us, and we'll be back soon.
All right. Bye, guys.
Hey, thanks for listening to the Classroom Collaborative Podcast.
If you are enjoying these episodes, please make sure that you subscribe wherever you are finding them.
And share and rate it so others can find it as well.
We'll see you guys on the next episode. Thanks for listening.
Bye.